Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Wherever you are at. Isn't it sometimes fun to think about where the listeners are? Like, where are the people when they listen to a show? Are they in their car? Are they folding laundry?
Oh, yeah.
Like, doing a menial task with your earbuds in? Are they on a treadmill?
Walking the dog.
Walking the dog. That's a good one.
Probably always multitasking.
No one is just sitting in a chair, staring into space, listening to an episode.
I wish for them that they could.
I do too. Gazing, as Father Rohr told us.
Gazing and listening.
Just gazing sounds lovely, but no one's doing that. They're listening with half an ear while they're like driving to soccer maybe, or I think I've said this before, but when I listen to podcasts, it's pretty singular. I listen to podcasts while I get my eyelashes done. I go and I get my eyelashes done. They glue them on one at a time like just some sort of idiot.
Is this true? You catch up?
Well, I don't have a giant array of podcasts that I listen to. So I listen to, okay. Would you like to know my podcast situation?
Yes.
I am pretty focused. My eyelash appointment podcast is Smartless.
Okay.
And it keeps me close to being up.
Yeah.
So that gets me about 1.5. And so I enjoy that one so much.
I did know that was your number one.
Yeah. I just enjoy the banter. I like those friends. I like those people. Jason Bateman is like my person. But I will tell you this, and you would enjoy it. This is absolutely new information. Like this is what do they call it when you do the scroll at the bottom of like urgent update? You know what? That's crazy news.
Byron.
Like it's like Fox News, like urgent.
Yeah.
The banner starts going. Anyways, I just downloaded and started listening to Amy Poehler's new podcast. It's brand new. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 episodes are out. It's called Good Hang.
Oh.
And, I love her.
Yeah.
Love her. Like, she's one of my comedy female icons. What do you listen to?
Rainn Wilson, Soul Boom.
Yeah. I keep getting recommended for that one.
I listen to the telepathy tapes, which...
I know.
Yeah.
I know. We've had this thing.
And now there's like...
I really need to start watching that.
ongoing updates, so I'll listen to that.
Hold on, I'm going to tell, he's just listening, he's lurking in the room, but our producer Pepper is always on with us for every episode. So Pepper, you should probably queue up the telepathy tapes. Amy is like the third person in a real rapid fire way who said, Jen, you have to listen to this podcast. And I don't know why I haven't obeyed you yet, but anyway, keep going.
It's mind-blowing. That's about it.
Yeah.
I also don't listen to a ton of podcasts. Sometimes I'll go listen to like stuff you should know, or like a sciencey thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do so much listening and reading in preparation for this podcast. We have constant experts on. So we are literally nonstop reading their books, listening to their podcasts, listening to their interviews, getting ready for our own interviews. So that fills up a lot of...
That has taken the place of podcasts for me.
Yeah. I get that. Anyways, that was a detour. The point was, whatever else you're doing, we're happy to be like your side diversion right now. So we're holding like a little bit of room today for a conversation that is timely and relevant this week of Mother's Day. It's funny because I lead a lot of women and I write for women, and I've just learned over the years of many, many, many Mother's Days online, in a social media setting. This is just such a complicated day.
It is. Like,
it isn't the one thing where it just isn't. Like, sure, for plenty of people, it's joyful and it's full of gratitude and honoring or whatever the things are. And that is just not the only story.
No, not at all.
A lot of people come into this day with grief, loss, disappointment. Mm-hmm. And frankly, even when it's all like going to according to some sort of traditional plan, a ton of women come to it just exhausted, absolutely exhausted by motherhood.
Yes, which is why, since my kids were little bitty, what I do for Mother's Day is ask my husband to take my children away from the house.
How did you know to do that so early?
I mean, desperation, and because I think the breaking point was we spent a Mother's Day, like when I already had 2 kids, in a Papados.
Oh, that's so random.
With but like that level of chaos. That is a loud, fun restaurant
With
like
toddlers.
With a baby and a toddler, and it's naturally nap time when you go out to eat after church. Like, whose idea was this?
Yeah, I know.
And I just said, I can't. This is, and also just society telling you, like, this is your special day. You're supposed to appreciate everything.
Oh, sure.
Like, and then I guess the next year I said, I can't.
I don't want that.
But it actually works out really well. Like, Brad spends it with his mom. I spend it with my mom. Typically, like, the boys go with him. It's great now.
Great. I love this.
But also there are people who are like, you don't want to be with your children on Mother's Day.
Jeez, I know. Yeah. Dare you.
And I say, no, like, what's the point of the holiday?
Thanks. I remember thinking this, my thought around this, especially in the young motherhood days when it was just, it was a chaos factory. And then also that was at the height of me wanting to, I guess, do everything and like be in charge of everything. And I did. And I remember one Mother's Day, it's babies everywhere. And I am getting presents for my own mom. I'm getting presents for my husband's mom and grandmother. And I am trying to wrangle everybody for the Mother's Day brunch or whatever.
Yes.
I'm in charge of all of it. And I'm like, I hate this effing day. Like, I'm exhausted. I don't even want to go. So I remember one year on socials, I posted, I'd come across somebody else's thing where she was like, this is my Mother's Day. And this woman had literally just gone like a few miles up the road, rented a hotel room for the night, brought all her favorite snacks, her books, and she just like posted up in the hotel room by herself all day, overnight, slept in. I'm like, why is this woman a genius?
Yes.
And it kind of goes to your point. Like, what would feel like a great Mother's Day? And for some people it is, I want to be surrounded by all of the chaos.
Absolutely.
And the children. That's their best day.
But shouldn't the point be that you tailor the day to the mother and what would make her feel loved and restored and celebrated? And for a lot of people, like introverts, that's to be alone.
It's true.
But yes, I've been criticized and reviled for not wanting to go out to eat with small children on Mother's Day.
No, not for me. Not for me.
But
this is how Amy and I actually met. I think we told this story maybe on the first podcast we ever did together last summer or the second, but we met each other in the days of the littles. You remember, I got some of these details wrong the first time. Who had just been born?
The youngest, number 4.
That's right.
Like 6 months old, maybe.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, we had met at church. We had talked because of the garden, maybe.
What year was this?
That would have been 2009.
Yeah, that's right. Started the church in 2008. And so it was just a scrappy little fledgling back there.
We got there 6 months later.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and I had work friends still because I had worked part-time, but still continuously. But then with number 4, the cost of childcare didn't balance out.
Yeah.
So I wasn't working in my neighborhood, there hadn't been much of a turnover. And so everybody was my parents' age still.
Yeah.
Like nobody leaves that neighborhood.
That's right.
So I was in the weeds alone.
That's right.
I mean, I had some friends who stepped up and helped so much, but they worked full time.
Yeah, right.
So during the day, I was by myself.
Yeah, Amy reached out to me in some way and said, "Can you come over to my house, for lunch or whatever?" My memory tells me you said something direct, like, "I'm kind of lonely and freaking out."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
I would have. I was at the point where I already didn't care about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I would have said,
Yeah.
I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
I can't do this by myself. You're technically the pastor's wife, so isn't it your job to come over and help me?
You're required. I'm going to tattle if you don't come.
Yeah.
And, we barely knew each other. And so I come over, and truly, she had 4 little boys. They were just everywhere. And a baby. And at the time, I had 3 littles. Let me just think. Oh, wait. Yeah. Like I had elementary kids, 3 elementary kids. Wait, is that right? How can I not know? 8.
Yeah.
Gavin was 10. So we had 10, 8, and 6 at the time. So I was just a scotch ahead of you, but still like drowning all the time. What's funny about this is that, so it was quick. We had quick bond. But at one point, and Amy's she's just drowning. So she brings out and she shows me her color-coded spreadsheet for essentially how to manage every day of the week. Is correct?
Correct.
Like in little time blocks of like 15 damn minutes or some insane structure. And I was compassionate about it.
I think I was probably saying, how can I adjust this schedule so that it works better for us?
Sure.
Because I can't keep up.
It's not working.
And they were in Mother's Day out maybe 2 mornings a week. Not the baby, but the older 2. So I felt like that should be plenty of time to get everything done.
Jeez.
Why am I at the end of my rope all the time?
That's right.
And then you tore my spreadsheet in half.
I tore it with my hands like a bear. I'm like, we're not adjusting the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet's going in the trash. And I can only imagine what you must have thought. Who is this violent pastor's wife who is over here like tearing up my systems?
And honestly, in my brain, it felt real that I was going to have to start from scratch with motherhood. Like the spreadsheet was gone. And
what do we even do?
You had said, you had older kids. Yeah. So, when you've got littles, you look for people who are 5 years ahead of you, who seem to be managing okay. Sure. And you're like, okay, I just need to learn from them and do what they're doing. And then it will be okay. And I was like, well, I guess she does this without a spreadsheet. But that means for me, I have to start completely from scratch. Oh, yeah. Change my personality.
Sure.
Abandon any aptitudes I might have.
That's right.
Because they were all embedded in that color-coded spreadsheet.
Yeah. Maybe trade out a kid or 2, to be honest.
Right. Like, now, am I going to make it?
Yeah.
I didn't think I was. It's actually not helpful.
How did that go? How did that go after I ruined your systems?
I tried really hard to adhere to the spreadsheet without a printed reference.
I see.
Which made my brain even more broken.
That wasn't helpful, is what you're saying. It was. I'm like, right, that would have been easier. Oh, no, that's not what you're saying.
What I'm saying is I could not change my entire personality, gain all new skills and aptitudes.
You couldn't turn into Jana King just overnight. Tra-la-la, laissez-faire.
God knows I have tried.
I know. So have we all, to be honest. I'm closer than you are, but
you are. No, I could not tra-la-la
Shanna
motherhood
King is
after
my
that.
mom, in case you guys always wonder who we're referencing. My mom is just the most laid back mom that just ever lived. She had 4 little kids too.
I know.
But she just sort of, I don't know. I don't understand my mom's demeanor.
I've asked her so many times and would call her in the middle of a crisis. Like, everybody crying, including me.
Right.
Jan, like, what do I do? And she's like,
go put them in the room.
Put them in their room and go watch TV. Yeah. Like, take a break.
Put them in the backyard.
How?
She used to tell me that all the time.
How do I take a break? And she would
she's like, you just do. I know. My mom, I think I've included this in a couple of books, but it's one of my most hilarious moments with my mom. I remember when my kids were all little and we were sort of in the weeds, and you're just trying so hard. We just were trying so hard to do it all, to do the healthy eating and the nap schedule and the bedtime routine and the intellectual stimulation, and let's work on our colors. We were just trying so hard. It was so damn exhausting. And we're convinced we're just doing everything terrible. And I remember asking my mom, like, in just a moment of absolute vulnerability, like, Mom, did you and your friends ever did you just worry that you were just getting everything wrong in parenting? Thinking my mom could comfort me.
No.
And she's like, God, no. She goes, you and your friends, and she brings up her little air quote fingers, you and your friends parent. She's like, we just raised you. I'm like, like, I don't exactly know the difference, but I kind of do.
Yeah.
That gap was really hard to find. Of just, the pressure our generation had is different than theirs, isn't it? I don't really know.
Well, yes. I mean, they didn't have like ads on the television every 5 minutes for baby Mozart. Like, it was just, we had so many influences coming at us.
Yes, we did.
All the time about the best way to put your kids down for a nap. Like, everything was micromanaged from a consumerism standpoint.
That is so true.
And so we were just like literally on the treadmill, like running the rat race with babies.
That's right.
When we really should have just been like sitting outside, gazing.
But don't forget, at the same time, we're getting this other like message that had become elevated, which was follow your dreams and be awesome. You know what I mean? Build a career that is the joy of your life also.
And what Lucy talks about in this interview, all of this should come naturally.
That's right. And you should love it. You should love it. We don't have time for this, but I'm going to put a pin in this for a future conversation. You should see the complicated set of new rules for this generation's parents. It is sticky. Like, what we had was more like excellence. It was more like an outward criterion of order showed what good parents we are. This generation of parents has this entire set of rules around gentle parenting.
Yes.
And it's a deal.
I know this.
Yeah.
This has always been in the homeschool community.
Oh, yes.
One half.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
They tend to be on the far ends of the spectrum.
You're right. Like the rigid, strident homeschool space versus the kind of free balling.
Yeah.
Free balling. It works. It works here. You know what I mean?
That is actually very descriptive.
Okay. Amy mentioned Lucy because we are bringing back what was a very, very powerful episode with Lucy Jones. And it's timely yet again here during this week. And her work was really profound to me. And she dives into the real experience of motherhood, all of it. The beautiful parts, yes, but also the transformative parts, the confusing parts, the disorienting parts. And she's got this really fascinating approach to talking about motherhood. So first of all, let me tell you about Lucy. She's a science journalist, so she comes from that space. This isn't just like ideas in her little head. This is all very grounded. She's an award-winning British author. And what we're talking about today is her book, which is called Matrescence, which I love that word, matrescence, on the metamorphosis of pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood. She did not coin that phrase, but she brought it up to the top of the pile, and I love it. So her book is a blend of her personal story and then neuroscience and sociology and then even ecological research. And so she also wrote Losing Eden and Foxes Unearthed. She has written for The Guardian, The Sunday Times, BBC Earth, more. And I would say she's really passionate about challenging these cultural myths that Amy and I were really just talking about that very much end up isolating mothers and serve as a barrier for telling the truth because we feel lonely, we feel like we're doing it wrong, and we're missing our marks. And so this is for everybody who's a mother, whether you're a young mom or anywhere along the spectrum, you'd like to become one, or you love a mother. You love someone who has been through this. This is a beautiful episode, and this conversation is a relief. It is relief. We're not adding to your pile of what you should be doing better as a mom. This is the opposite of that. So I think you are going to absolutely love this episode.
Yeah. I learned so much.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. This one really, really stuck with me. And then interestingly, people referenced it to me quite a bit out in the wild.
Oh.
They were just like, oh, that episode was really profound for me. And I sent it to my daughter. I sent it to my sister. So we hope this meets you tenderly today, wherever you are, whether you're a mom, you love a mom, you'd like to be a mom. So happy, happy Mother's Day. We love you. Lucy, welcome to the show. I'm so very glad that you are here. I know my community well, and everyone's going to be on their edge of their seat for this conversation. So thanks for coming.
It's such a pleasure. I'm really hyped to be here and speak to you and meet you. Thank you.
I've told my community a little bit about you, but would you mind, before we sort of dive into your specific body of work, just a little bit about you? Like this is who you are, and this is where you are, and these are your people, and this is kind of your deal.
Sure. So I'm speaking to you from England, where I live in a small town outside London, surrounded by beautiful woodlands. I am married to a man, and I have 3 children who are quite young still, 3, 4, and 7. And I am a writer. I've written 4 books, and I'm a journalist. And I am always trying to figure out life, I suppose.
Yeah.
In many different ways. So yeah, that's me.
Yep. And those of us who write figure it out by writing. One of my favorite writers who's passed on, but he said something like, I do not yet know what's in my heart, but I suspect I will find it as I write. And I'm like, yep, that's how it works. And so speaking of that, you have a really interesting bit of work out in the world right now. And it's a word, frankly, that I had to figure out how to pronounce. It's not in the zeitgeist yet. Matrescence, which is the name of your book. And so for people who are they just hit download and they're listening to this episode, let's just start at the highest entry point here. What is that? What does that mean? Did you make that word up, or is that a real word? And let's start there. But then the next thing I'd like to hear is, why does this matter to you? What was your funnel into this space as a journalist, as a writer, as someone who went, I want to spend a handful of years on this subject?
Thank you for giving the chance to talk like this. Okay, so a simple definition. It's a very simple concept, really. Matrescence simply means the process of becoming a mother. So the word is a little bit like adolescence. I did not make it up. It was coined by the late American anthropologist Dana Raphael in the 70s. So she coined the word matrescence. She also coined the word doula. And the first text and source which introduces this word to us is in an essay collection which was published in 1974, where Dana Raphael talks about how in most cultures and societies across the world, people have always had a sense that a mother is born when a baby is born, that a sense of the newborn mother, and that becoming a mother is recognized in most places as a kind of traumatic life crisis, a time where all of your obviously for a lot of people it's a wonderful joy, but it's also a time when everything changes physically, of course, but also she describes in your identity, in your social relationships, in your roles, in your everyday life, in your mind, your psychology, your emotions. And then this concept was developed in academic circles and has been written about by academics for the last kind of 10, 20 years. I wrote a book called Matrescence, which is about primarily my own matrescence. And I wanted to call it that. And I became so interested in the subject because discovering that word absolutely transformed my life. So I came to it through an article by the reproductive psychiatrist Alexandra Sachs in the New York Times. I had, my daughter was born in September 2016. I had little idea about anything really to do with motherhood. I was very happy to be pregnant. She was much longed for. But I found myself totally blindsided by becoming a mother. Birth was obviously incredibly intense. I found myself really mixed up in a lot of ideologies and myths and ideals around, wanting to be a kind of scare quote natural mother. And I found that it was the most kind of psychological, emotional, existential, spiritual experience of my life. And at the time, I thought I was going mad. Everything around me in my culture was like, it's all about the baby. You will go back to work quickly. You'll be the same. You'll bounce back, get your body back. I thought my body was like a box or a flower pot in pregnancy. And then when she was born, I would go back to myself. But that was absolutely not the case. So I spiraled a bit into a bad place, and I was diagnosed with postnatal depression, and just found that first year seismic and bewildering. But then I found this article and I read this word matrescence, and it said, this is the process of becoming a mother. Of course, joy is normal, but so is fear. So is bringing up your own childhood stuff. So is anger. So is resentment. And for the first time, my shoulders dropped and I felt like I could breathe. And I was like, okay, this is what it is. This is what my culture hasn't been able to prepare me for, but this is what it is. And it's normal and it's okay. Well, it's not okay in our society, which I'm sure we'll go on to, but it is part of it.
Yes. Wow. I was a young mom when I became one. I had my oldest son when I was 23. And so I didn't, my peers were obviously not mothers yet. And I was just early to the story. And there was just so very little about anything. Everything that you just said was not anything I ever heard. My culture, the the breadth of the preparation was really more like, this is your highest calling, and it will be magic. And this is what you're here for. And this is a miracle, and it will feel as such. And I had no idea, absolutely no idea of the scope. Some of that was true, some in pieces and occasionally, and sometimes it wasn't. And so I'd like to hear, I love that you grabbed that word and article. This just on a side note, it just reminds me that words matter, and people who take the time to write an article or a book or a thought piece, it matters. These words travel to us and can really change our trajectory. So you grab a hold of this word, this concept, and then what? What did you do first? Because also you've got a baby, and as mentioned, your body is literally different, and in some ways will always be. And so I'd love to hear what the early process looked like for you of research, of discovery, of investigation. What did you start to find out?
Sure. And firstly, I so relate to what you said about your imaginings or the expectations that had been presented to you about motherhood. I grew up in a very conservative, patriarchal, cult-like Christian sect.
Oh, yeah.
So we have some
now
similarities. Kind of conservative evangelical sect in England, which I've broken away from. But I was very much brought up in that. And it was, women weren't allowed to preach and all this stuff. So my image as well in my head was the very calm and chilled, Virgin Mary, like the pictures on my wall when I was growing up of, Jesus was never having a tantrum. It looked chilled. It looked natural. So I think that added to the shock. So what happened next? Well, discovering this word, I didn't discover it, but happening upon it in this article, gave me the confidence to start talking to other mothers. Even though I had my kids, I was about 31 when my first child was born. Not many of my peers were having children. And I found that when I went to baby groups and mother and toddler groups, I don't know what you guys call them over there, but it was like I'd almost sometimes leave even more lonely because no one was talking about how they felt and how it feels to have your heart, walking around outside your body. And I was thinking about death all the time, and I was like having this existential crisis, and I was terrified, and I was angry that I was so vulnerable, having this thing that I love more than anything in the world. I was like, this is blowing my existential mind, and everyone's talking about nap schedules and feeding and stuff. So eventually finding this word matrescence gave me the confidence to talk to other mothers. And what I found was that so many of them, once they could open up, were really struggling. Of course, most of them were overjoyed to have their baby. Loving the babies was not difficult, but there was anger, there was stress, there was dangerously extreme sleep deprivation. I felt that there was like an epidemic of women oppressed and suppressed by really cruel maternal ideals, which kind of in matrescence seem to kind of trap people who previously would be even independent thinkers, and that it was like walking onto a stage in a new part, which meant the feeling rules, which is an Ali Hochschild term, were so strong, the psychological police state of motherhood. So that gave me kind of the confidence to interview people and to start writing. And also, of course, there's also a lot of taboo around maternal joy and maternal bliss. It's almost like everything about motherhood is a taboo. In the workplace, you have to pretend you don't have kids, and everyone gets embarrassed and bored if you start talking about how much you love your kids. the whole thing is so diminished and disavowed. But what happened was I write science journalism as well. And I was so lucky that at the same time that I started to really try and record exactly what was happening to me, some of the earliest landmark, groundbreaking neuroscience was being published about the parental brain. And there's this kind of matriarchy of scientists now, who many of whom are women, not all, but who are working in these areas to try and fill myriad gaps that we have around the maternal experience. And one of them, for example, was in 2016, the first study was published which showed that pregnancy renders pronounced and significant changes to the human brain. So it literally makes your brain change shape as powerfully as adolescence. Now, of course, not all mothers are pregnant. And we also know that, and this won't be news to anyone who is an adoptive mother or indeed a father or a non-birthing mother, but the brain also changes in non-birthing parents through hands-on care and affectionate touch. It's the baby which, after the birth, can change the brain of the caregiver. And I'll end on this point. I'm going on a bit, but
oh no, I want you to. This is fascinating. The neuroscience behind it is absolutely fascinating. You could talk about this as long as you want. Okay. It does make sense.
Yeah, right. It does, because we evolved. I didn't realize this before I became a mum. I thought the nuclear family is the tradition. And actually, we evolved in collective caregiving networks. For 95% of our evolutionary history, there were many what's called allo parents and allo mothers. So lots of different people helping the mum, responding to the baby, fathers being involved too, with the very clear knowledge that mothers can't do it all and that they need to rest. And it's actually probably better for the baby to have lots of people. So that makes sense that, we're all born with the neural circuitry to care for infants. And all this science is kind of upending a lot of our kind of oppressive, patriarchal, traditional ideas, which I think even in 2024 really come in with teeth in motherhood.
I think this all the time when I catch the tale of what the motherhood story looks like in other countries and other cultures. And it is so opposite what we experience here and you experience there. It is so communal. The mother's recovery and sleep schedule is prioritized. The community comes around the baby and the family. Like, it is, the men and the women all have time off work, extended time, paid. And it shocks me when I hear it. I just think that cannot be true. Is this true? And I realize other cultures have figured this out. And that feels so much more healthy and nurturing and making that phase possible. But I mean, it would not have occurred to me to solicit that level of help when I had the babies. I did almost everything with a smile, because it was, my highest calling. And I remember sitting in my rocking chair with my firstborn, and he was maybe 4 days old, maybe 5, and just like unbidden tears, just like falling down my face. And I just remember sitting there going, I was 23, going, what is wrong with me? And do I not love my baby? I didn't know what to do with feelings, and nobody told me I'd have any. So, okay.
You just hear the baby blues. You
yes.
just have the baby blues on, and that it's just like minimizing this kind of huge seismic dramatic experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a kind of a cute little phraseology around it, and kind of like a chin up, little girl, little lady, like, you'll just press on. And, I wonder what it would have been like to have been surrounded with some of your scaffolding and your research and the language of it, the physiology of it. I I'm hopeful for younger moms in the next generation. I love how you are saying that this body of neuroscience is not just new, but growing. And I wrote down what you said about the matriarchy of scientists, because that is a profound phrase. I want to ask you this specifically. Obviously, you just mentioned that your background is also science writing, so that you are no stranger to parsing out a lot of complicated scientific data and making it accessible to readers. And so in Matrescence, you write pretty critically, not just about what is the neuroscience teaching us, but to expose fallacies, myths, that have been sold for a long time to expecting mothers. I'd really like to hear you talk about some of those. What did you uncover? I think most of us are going to know these experientially when you say them. And maybe what the data, what the science suggests as an alternative to these narratives.
Sure. Well, how long have you got, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I know, right?
I think this, like, the institution of motherhood today is just like laden still with myths and half truths and misinformation and deception. Scientists only figured out, I think, last year why people get morning sickness. And what, I say morning sickness, I'm doing scare quotes here, because, like, as many of us know, that is a complete lie. It's all day sickness, but it's called morning sickness, which again minimizes and denies the actual experience. So scientists found out why there might be pregnancy, nausea, and sickness last year in 2024. How has it taken that long?
Right, because it's for women, not for men.
Exactly. And
Yes.
That's an example of where I think there's a pattern of this that we see, that things are falsely named, or they are there's not much known about them. And so then, for me, for example, I was very sick, extremely nauseous for about 5 or 6 months in my pregnancies. And because it was called morning sickness, I felt like a failure or ashamed that I didn't want to complain, because I thought, oh, it's just morning sickness. Everyone just, you eat ginger biscuits and so on. And I think we can see this in lots of different ways through the motherhood experience, like we were just talking about baby blues. And what I've seen in my conversations with women and in my reading is that this epidemic of disavowing the maternal experience leads to shame. And the stigma leads to a kind of abandoning of the self, almost a kind of closing down. I've been so overwhelmed. So Matrescence is out in the States, I don't know, around in May. I'm not sure when this goes out, but it's been out in the UK for almost a year. And the amount of messages I've had from women who have said things like, you're writing things I've never been able to say out loud or articulate. I've felt angry for years. I've not been able to ever kind of speak these feelings or these experiences. But going back to kind of the myths and the narratives, well, one of the areas that I found quite challenging was I love nature and I love the natural world, and I write about nature, and I was quite taken in by this idea of kind of natural motherhood, natural birth and long-term breastfeeding, and a natural maternal instinct, being able to, the whole deal, right? And that's very much here what is very much put on a pedestal. And my experience was that, birth is, there's a brilliant novelist in the UK called Claire Kilroy, and she calls it, you're split open from the inside. That's not going to be great. I mean, it wasn't for me. I know
It's
some people
not
have
going to be
fantastic
great.
births. Like from a lot of people, it's
That's
just
hard.
traumatic.
Yeah. Yes.
And it, I did all the things that I thought I should do, like all the hypnobirthing and all the breathing, and actually I found the pain to be, almost indescribable. And then feeding, I had really big breastfeeding struggles, and I so desperately wanted to breastfeed my baby exclusively for the time we were meant to, and I felt like a complete failure because I couldn't produce milk, enough milk, and going on to formula, it was devastating for me. And now looking back, I can see that my children are fine. They were mixed fed. Formula is fine. But I was so taken in by this kind of breast is best idea that I couldn't even see straight. And I think for me, that really precipitated a real sinking, a sense of like catastrophic failure, that I was failing my beautiful daughter, which actually precipitated postnatal depression for me. And then you've got this idea and this myth of, the natural maternal instinct, which I think that people, or I imagined I would just know what to do. We know they say things like, books will say like the Spock book. It says like, you know best. And then, there's 800 pages of instructions.
Right.
A bit disingenuous, right? But
right.
There's this idea that trust your instinct. And, I had an instinct to protect and care for and love my baby, but she cried for hours every day and I couldn't soothe her. And there was nothing, I was just holding her and she was crying, and that went on for months. And, there's something quite difficult about being alone in a house and listening to, being with a crying baby. And there was a point where I thought, I can smell smoke. Like, my nervous system is not evolved for this. Like this level of, and I did have probably a higher needs baby, but this kind of isolated, intensive caregiving when my husband was out at work. And to speak to your previous point about the cultures in the UK and the US and how we're probably the most individualistic nations, I suppose, I was trained to be self-reliant and self-sufficient, and that asking for help is so uncomfortable for me. So even though I have a very loving family, asking for help was, I'm still trying to learn that, like 8 years in. So, I think these myths go on, and then we see, like, in more specific to science and medicine and health, there are so many research gaps and areas, like, for example, recovery after childbirth. Like, there can be lots of complications with childbirth and what it does to the maternal body and how that can affect you years afterwards. I think there's something that happens in matrescence where, like, it can affect your long-term, your hormones, your PMS. I know so many women, this is just anecdotal, who, me included, who their PMS, their moods and their, well-being before their periods, after giving birth, is just totally different and much harder. They call it PMDD. And I feel like there's just, which it's just called hormones, all this stuff. We see it, like, people learning a bit more about menopause and stuff, but we desperately need nuance and investment in women.
And don't you think, I'm wanting to lay the axe at the root of the tree and think systemically here, because I'm also, as you're speaking, I'm realizing how many instances that you just described, the chief offenders are women telling other women, this is what's best, this is what's right, this is how to do it. It's sometimes we're a part of the whole system. It's not truly not our fault. Like, we were handed a story and we believed it. It's just kind of that simple. And then we found our hooks into the system and we contribute to it. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on the systemic challenges here that make all of this hard. That, to your point, hell, we are discovering neuroscience around this year, in the year 2024, our Lord. I mean, what in the world? There's science delays. There's cultural misinformation. This comes down to an individual experience, but it is a really big system that a lot of us are experiencing. And so what are some of those systemic challenges that make truth harder to access here, good instruction, hope, a different storyline, and then ultimately the capacity to make different choices?
You put that so well, Jen. And, just thinking about the science when you were speaking, like, isn't it kind of interesting that in our cultures in the global north, we need science to tell us something which, most people know, which is that, of course, becoming a mother is a big deal. And we have, there are lots of cultures and societies which have these rites and these rituals and these ceremonies, which hold the newborn mother and which facilitate a way of looking after the mother while she heals, so she can look after the baby, and acknowledging, safe passage through childbirth, and like what a big thing that is. But you're right, it's incredibly systemic. And one of the most useful concepts that I found in my writing, in my research, was the poet Adrienne Rich, in her book of Woman Born, which was published 50 years ago, in the 70s, and which I read it, I was like, okay, this is like my life now. How is that the case? Like, I thought me and my husband were equal in like social stature, and like, and then a baby is born and like the world sees you completely differently. So Adrienne Rich talked about the institution of motherhood and the experience of motherhood, and she distinguished between the two, which I think is really helpful and useful for us today, because it allows us to critique and think about the systems and structures of the institution, and then keep that separate from the experience of motherhood. Because my sense, and this is definitely how I have felt, is that people think that any complaint about motherhood is seen as a complaint about a child. And, we all adore our children. So, you don't want anyone to think that you don't love your kids. I think that is one of the things which means really difficult to talk about motherhood, because, as a society, people are also on the alert for, child stuff. And anyway, the point is, this concept about the institution of motherhood is really, really helpful. And if we go a bit deeper, I mean, I think there is so much layered on mothers and new mothers. So we have these like old guys from the past, going even back to like Aristotle and Aquinas, who basically said that, you might think women are the ones who create people and have babies, but it's actually men. They made up these kind of crazy stories to try and kind of minimize women. And then you've got the Industrial Revolution, and you have decisions being made by, in the global north, these male thinkers, where they are creating this industrial institution of motherhood, whereas before it was much more collective, it was much more people were kind of living alongside each other. Then you've got the men going off to factories and so on, and the women at home, and then you see these maternal ideals developing, where motherhood is very sentimentalized. There's the angel in the house. There is the woman becomes this kind of symbol of the hearth and kind of a sanctuary. So what we're battling today is quite big, deep-seated cultural ideas. But what I found really useful and what I tried to do with my book is if we can see that and see how that was constructed and how it was invented, and that every society and culture invents its idea of motherhood, then we can become empowered to dismantle those ideas and create our own ways of being mothers, our own ways of caring. Andrea O'Reilly, who's an incredible writer, and I don't know if you know her, but she's so wonderful. She coined this, she's absolutely a matriarch as well. She coined this phrase, matricentric feminism, which is a feminism for mothers, which isn't to say, all feminism should be for mothers, but that there needs to be a feminism for mothers. And then you've got, there's a lot of kind of revolutionary, radical motherhood ideas. Adrienne Rich, I'll end on this, talked about being kind of an outlaw of the institution of motherhood. But I think that the factor that can help individuals and societies go from, this kind of trap, as it were, to empowered mothering, and a society which values care, which we clearly don't, is through, it's so obvious, but connection and talking and, words and sharing our vulnerability, and sharing our interdependence, which I will end on this, which our dominant cultures tells us is not true. We're told we're kind of these isolated individual machines. We've got to be self-reliant. We've got to be self-sufficient. You don't need anyone. That's a sign of weakness. But that doesn't work. Like when you're bringing children into the world, it's a fallacy.
I have one more question for you, kind of a final word from you that I'd love to hear, because the data it's startling, it's alarming. Postnatal depression globally, 17%. That's high. That's a lot. In the UK, suicide's the leading cause of death for women during the period between 6 weeks and 1 year after giving birth. That's a big deal. There is a lot here. This isn't an alarmist conversation. Women are not hysterical. This is just real. And so you, having experienced all of this and then moved into the space of research, writing, discovery, investigation, examination, what have you learned? So I've got kind of two questions here. Based on everything you have now sort of assimilated, how is this affecting your motherhood? What have you done to go, okay, if I get to write and need to write my own story of motherhood, if that is upon us, it's our right and our duty to do so. What does that mean for you? Like what looks different? What are some of the rhythms that you've challenged, or whatever it is? I don't know. I'd love to hear it. And then finally, I'm thinking about my listener right now who is in the throes of it and feeling isolated, lonely, embarrassed, ashamed, afraid. Maybe a word of hope for her and what you see as a possibility for us, that this doesn't have to be something of an isolated life sentence.
You put that so well. Yes, the maternal mental health crisis, the maternal health crisis is gruesome. And it's a political decision. So if we look at matrescence and how our societies treat women, pregnant women as they're giving birth and afterwards, it's a real avenue with which it illuminates our political structures and our ideas of value. So in the UK, Black women and women of ethnic minorities are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. We know that women who are from socioeconomic disadvantage, poverty, refugees, again, Black or Asian women are much more likely to suffer from postnatal depression. So, yeah, it's a place where the inequalities, the structural racism in our society is laid bare, and that it's not a national emergency is beyond me, and it must be. So your first question, how has learning all about this changed my rhythms? It has taken me a while to loosen myself from some of the ideas of the maternal ideal. I don't beat myself up as much as I once did. I try and challenge the idea in my head, which is still there, which is that I can't have time to look after myself. I kind of feel naturally like I should spend all my time with my children or being productive and working. And in motherhood, taking any time for me has been really challenging. I'm trying to learn how to accept help and to ask for help a bit more. But for the listener who is in the thick of it, and I feel so strongly for you and those people out there. I've done a lot of events in the last year where in a literary event you talk for 45 minutes and there's a kind of 10-15 minute Q&A, and often there's a signing afterwards. And what really stays with me are those women. Sometimes they come with their babies and they're crying and they're traumatized and they feel abandoned by society. And if you zoom out on that, what could be more cruel for a woman to give birth, go through something so difficult, and of course there was a wonderful baby, but then she's left. And I mean, it makes me so angry, and that's what fuels my writing. But to that woman, I would say, reach out, find your people, listen to podcasts. Like I found my village very much often online, like podcasts like this, listening to voices of women who were lifting up other women, saying it as it is, audiobooks, because sometimes it's really hard to get out. You must try and get out of a baby, but sometimes it's tricky. So, there's a lot of good stuff online, I think, challenging the idea. And also just know that there's nothing wrong with you. It's not you, it's the system. And it's the isolated institution of intensive mothering, which is failing us and which is changing. Like I feel really confident that there's so many people pushing back on this, and that there's like a reservoir of anger and power which is being released, and we're making it different.
I agree. I have the advantage of hosting a space where I am having a lot of important and leading conversations. And so I have so many interesting thinkers and researchers and scientists and doctors and activists on this show. And so to your point, this idea is elevated and amplified right now. And I am hopeful. I'm hopeful for what this will ultimately mean for the next generation. I mean, I can tell you, I've got a daughter who's about to turn 24, and this has trickled down. That they do not have some of these antiquated ideas about what will be required of them and what motherhood should look like, and even if they want to be a mom at all. But if it's working, is my point. I think new instruction, new science, louder conversations, more writers like you. Like I said earlier, words matter, and they change people's minds and they deliver hope. And I hope that we are among the last generations of mothers who felt so alone during this phase of life, that the rhythms do indeed shift. I'm so glad that your book is making its way over here to the States. It's a mess over here, as you might be knowing. It is a mess for mothers right now. Our bodies are in danger. Our motherhood story is in danger. And so we need the good voices more than ever. And so your book is out. Can you tell my listeners, this is where they can find you. This is where they can follow you. This is where they can find your book, all the things.
Yeah, sure. And I just loved what you just said. And I think, if we could just say to people, how's your matrescence? Or like, how was your matrescence? Just that, it brings out a space for people to think about how they're doing. So you can find me. I am on Instagram, Lucy F. Jones. I have a website. I'm on Twitter, or X, whatever it is, but not very much. I'm mostly on Instagram. And Matrescence is out in the States May 7th or 9th, I think.
Yes. Marvelous. Fantastic. Thanks for being on today. I feel hopeful having listened to you, and a touch less lonely. I think that, to your point, connection it's powerful. This thing where we get to say to one another, oh yeah, me too. That's normal. That's normal. Like, we're here with you in it is hell. It feels like 80% of it.
It really does. Yeah. Being able, and, to say kind of like, of course you feel that, this is hard and that's okay. You're going to get through it. And yeah, I think I really agree that 80%, I think there's so much in that which can then lead to social change.
That's right. Okay, Lucy, great to meet you. I'm so glad that you were here. And thank you for giving us a whole hour of your time. I'm just telling you that I know that this episode is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. So appreciate you.
I am so grateful, and thank you so much. And I also really want to read your books. I really want to. Where shall I start?
I'll send them to you. I will send them to you.
I will buy
you
them.
Will
I'll
not.
Support you as an author.
You will not.
But, I particularly want to read the one which is about excess or moderation, or what's it called?
Oh, 7. Oh, that was a huge season of life. Yeah, okay. It was a kind of an experiment against like our excessive culture. It was life-changing, to be honest.
I really want to read that. I'm very interested, and I'm going to let you go, but I'm just dying to read your words, and thank you very much.
It was so good.
Yeah.
And I was struck just because so many of our conversations lately have been about menopause and perimenopause, that if we understood what happens to specifically our brains, like the chemical changes, the structural changes in our brains with motherhood, whether we gave birth or not, because it happens just with infant care, that we would have been better primed to understand the changes that we experienced in perimenopause.
Totally.
Like if there was just more collective knowledge about what happens just hormonally,
right,
that we would have been better able to advocate for ourselves in doctors' offices and therapists' offices. And when we were gaslit that it wasn't that bad, we could have drawn on our knowledge of what happens with motherhood.
It's so true. A lot of what Lucy talked about and what I read in her book, I had never heard. And I've had 3 kids and lead a community of women, and a ton of which are moms. And so we were talking before this episode, before we started recording, it's just, there's such a lack of research here. And medical research is patriarchal, just at its core. So this hasn't been a source of useful capitalism.
Right. Although I will say research isn't needed to care for your community well if your community is structured for care.
That's good.
Like when we look at societies that nurture new mothers and raise infants
so true.
collectively by the village, they did not have this scientific research either.
so true.
But they saw what the need was and they built their culture around it.
Yes. You had the grandmothers and the aunts helping the young mothers. It was just a given that no mom was going to be on an island.
And then that culture of care in a small community walked you through all the big changes in your life up till like losing a spouse.
Totally.
And the grieving that happens and being able to take time off for these huge milestone events because you were set up for that.
Totally.
And we're just not.
No.
But now we're having to use scientific research to prove that we have those needs when we've always had those needs.
For sure.
But now we're having to, once we know this is actually what would help me get through this and then heal and then flourish, we're having to then go out and create that ourselves.
That's right.
From the ground up.
For sure. Per usual, we're going to have to be the ones we were waiting for. But it is hopeful that this conversation is raised to like a higher level of like cultural consciousness, and it's not so much in the shadows.
Yes, for sure.
And it is interesting to see the link between what we learn about childbirth and maternity as it relates also in a mirror image to perimenopause and menopause. So it's an interesting time. Like the next generation is going to know more and have more resources and probably do better than we did as well.
For sure.
Anyway, thanks for being here today. If you wanted more information, you can go to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab. You'll find this whole episode and the show notes, and we'll have links to Lucy's socials and her book and everything else that you might be interested in. And if you'd like to tell us anything that you heard today, or a response that you had, or a thought or an experience, on that same page, you'll see a send voicemail button, just tap it and you can leave us a message, and we listen to those, and we're going to share some of those on the show. And so we love hearing from you in any way, but we certainly love hearing your voices. And so thanks for being here. And we love all the women in our community and say happy Mother's Day, whether you are a mother or whether you emotionally help mother this next generation. There's so many ways that we are raising up women and girls and boys behind us. And so thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.